Sir, I believe I can help with your Chinese translation problem. The billionaire CEO's face twisted in disgust as she looked at the black janitor holding a mop. Security. Get this man out of here now. But what happened next would shake the entire boardroom to its core. How could a 53-year-old janitor possibly save a $2 billion deal that was about to collapse? Why did the Chinese investors' eyes widen in shock when this humble man opened his mouth? And what dark secret about corporate America would be exposed in front of everyone? This incredible true story will leave you speechless. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Victoria Sterling's Louboutin heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Each step echoed through the 42nd floor of Meridian Tech headquarters, matching the rapid beat of her heart. At 41, she had built an empire worth billions, but today, everything hung in the balance. David, she barked at her assistant, who scrambled to keep pace. Tell me you've triple-checked everything for the Zhangwei meeting. Yes, Ms. Sterling. The presentation is loaded, the contracts are prepared, and Ms. Chen from the translation service confirmed she'll be here at. Victoria's phone buzzed. She snatched it up, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the screen. The blood drained from her face as she read the message. No, no, and no. She whirled around, nearly knocking David over. Chen just cancelled. Car accident on the 405. She's in the emergency room. David's tablet slipped from his hands, clattering on the floor. But the meeting is in 2 hours. Zhang Wei is already en route from the airport. You think I don't know that? Victoria's voice could have cut glass. This deal is worth $2 billion. $2 billion. It's the biggest expansion opportunity in Meridian's history, and now we don't have anyone who speaks Mandarin. She stormed past the executive conference room where the meeting would take place. Through the glass walls, she could see the carefully arranged presentations, the polished table that reflected the city skyline, the bottles of imported water placed precisely 2 feet apart. Everything was perfect except for one catastrophic detail. Get James up here. Now, she commanded. As David scurried away, Victoria pressed her palm against the cool glass. Zhang Wei was notoriously traditional, refusing to conduct business in English despite knowing the language perfectly. He considered it a test of respect. Would Western companies make the effort to meet him on his terms? Victoria had spent months preparing, even attempting to learn basic Mandarin herself, but she could barely manage hello and thank you. In the reflection of the glass, she caught sight of movement. A janitor was methodically cleaning the windows of the adjacent office, his gray uniform rendering him almost invisible against the corporate backdrop. The man moved with quiet efficiency, earbuds in place, completely absorbed in his work. Victoria didn't spare him a second glance. Victoria! James Thornton, her chief operating officer, burst from the elevator. His usually confident demeanor was replaced with barely controlled panic. David told me. This is a disaster. Tell me something I don't know, Victoria snapped. What about that intern from Berkeley? The Asian kid? Korean, James corrected. His Mandarin is elementary level at best. Zhang Wei would see it as an insult. The legal team? I already checked. Nothing. What about? I've called everyone, James interrupted, something he rarely dared to do. Every translation service in the city is either booked or can't get here in time. I even tried the Chinese consulate. Nothing. Victoria's mind raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. The Zhang Wei Industries deal would transform Meridian from a national player to a global powerhouse. They'd been courting the Chinese tech mogul for 18 months. He was finally ready to sign, but only after this final face-to-face meeting. We could video conference in a translator, David suggested meekly, having returned to the executive floor. Zhang Wei specifically requested no digital presence. James shot down the idea. He's paranoid about corporate espionage. That's why he insisted on paper contracts. The janitor had moved closer, now cleaning the brass fixtures outside the conference room. He worked methodically, thoroughly, as if the fate of billion-dollar deals didn't hang in the air around him. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed, and despite his age, probably mid-50s, he moved with a subtle grace that spoke of someone who took pride in his work, no matter how humble. "I won't lose this deal," Victoria declared, her voice low and dangerous. "I don't care if we have to kidnap a translator from the UN, find me someone who speaks fluent Mandarin, or start updating your resumes." The threat hung in the air like a guillotine. Everyone knew Victoria Sterling didn't make idle threats. She'd built Meridian by being ruthless when necessary, and she'd fire her own mother if it meant closing a deal. As the group dispersed to make frantic phone calls, none of them noticed the janitor pause in his work. Marcus Washington removed one earbud, his dark eyes thoughtful behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd heard every word of their conversation, and for the first time in 3 years of working at Meridian, he found himself considering breaking his carefully maintained silence. But not yet. He'd learned long ago that timing was everything, whether in diplomacy or in life. He replaced his earbud and continued cleaning, invisible as always, while the executives ran past him like he was just another piece of furniture. Time was running out, and Victoria Sterling was about to learn that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. The executive floor had transformed into a war room. Victoria stood at the center of the chaos, her phone pressed to one ear while barking orders to the half-dozen employees she'd summoned. Papers flew across desks, keyboards clattered frantically, and the air crackled with desperation. "I don't care what their hourly rate is," Victoria shouted into her phone. "If they can get here in 30 minutes and speak fluent Mandarin, I'll pay triple." She slammed the phone down. Incompetent fools. Elena Rodriguez, head of human resources, burst through the conference room doors. "I've gone through every employee file. We have 3 people who listed Mandarin on their resumes, but 2 are on vacation and one's proficiency is listed as conversational. That won't be enough for technical negotiations." "What about the universities?" Victoria demanded. "Call the language departments." "Already did," James replied, ending his own call. "The professors who could handle this level of interpretation are either in classes or can't drop everything for a corporate meeting." Victoria's carefully controlled facade was cracking. She'd spent 6 months preparing for this meeting, learning every detail about Zhang Wei's business preferences, his background, his interests. She'd even imported tea from his favorite plantation in Yunnan province. But she'd put all her faith in one translator, and now that single point of failure was destroying everything. "Ms. Sterling," David ventured cautiously, "perhaps we could explain the situation to Mr. Zhang. He might understand." "Understand?" Victoria whirled on him. Zhang Wei once walked out of a $10 billion merger because the CEO mispronounced his daughter's name. He terminated a partnership with Samsung because they served him coffee instead of tea. You think he'll understand that we can't even provide a translator? The room fell silent. Everyone knew the stories about Zhang Wei. He was brilliant, worth over $30 billion, and absolutely unforgiving when it came to what he perceived as disrespect. In Chinese business culture, face was everything, and failing to provide proper translation would be seen as either incompetence or arrogance, both unforgivable sins. 20 minutes until he arrives, someone announced, and the panic ratcheted up another notch. Victoria closed her eyes, trying to center herself. She'd grown up in poverty in rural Texas, the daughter of a single mother who cleaned houses for a living. She'd clawed her way through state school, survived on ramen and determination, and built Meridian from a 2-person startup in a garage to a billion-dollar corporation. She'd overcome every obstacle life had thrown at her. She wouldn't be defeated by something as simple as a language barrier. "Elena," she commanded, "I want you to access every contract worker, every temp, every person who's set foot in this building in the last year. Someone must speak Mandarin. The cleaning crew? Elena suggested hesitantly. Some of them might. The janitors? James scoffed. Come on, Elena. We need someone who can discuss technical specifications, intellectual property law, and international trade regulations in Mandarin. Not someone who can order takeout. Victoria nodded in agreement. We need a professional. Keep looking at translation services. Try New York, San Francisco. I don't care if we have to fly someone in by helicopter. Through the glass walls, she could see the regular business of Meridian continuing on the floors below. Engineers coding, salespeople making calls, accountants reviewing spreadsheets, all oblivious to the crisis threatening to topple their company's future. And there, still methodically cleaning, was that same janitor. He'd moved to the executive kitchen now, wiping down the imported Italian espresso machine that cost more than most people's cars. 15 minutes, David announced, his voice cracking. What about the State Department? Elena suggested. They must have. It's 4:47 on a Friday, James cut her off. Government offices are closing. Victoria felt the walls closing in. Every second that ticked by was another step closer to catastrophe. Zhang Wei would arrive expecting a seamless, professional meeting conducted in his native language. Instead, he'd find chaos and incompetence. The deal would die before it even began, and with it, Meridian's chance at global expansion. Miss Sterling? A security guard appeared at the door. Mr. Zhang's motorcade just pulled into the building. What? Victoria checked her phone. He's early. His assistant says he finished his previous meeting ahead of schedule. He's entering the lobby now. The blood drained from Victoria's face. In Chinese business culture, arriving early was a power move, a way to test if the other party was truly prepared. Zhang Wei was already testing them, and they were failing spectacularly. Everyone out except James and David, Victoria commanded. Make it look like we're calmly waiting, not like we're in full panic mode. David, get the tea service ready. James, pull up the presentation. Maybe if we start with visuals, we can buy time. To do what? James asked. Victoria, we need to face reality. We don't have a translator. We can't wing this. Then we're finished, Victoria said quietly, the weight of failure settling on her shoulders. 2 years of negotiations, millions in prep work, our entire Asian expansion strategy, gone. The elevator chimed in the distance. Zhang Wei was ascending to their floor. In less than 2 minutes, he'd walk into the conference room expecting to conduct complex business negotiations in Mandarin, and they had no one who could speak his language beyond a kindergarten level. The janitor had finished in the kitchen and was now gathering his supplies. He moved past the conference room, pushing his cart with the same unhurried pace he always maintained. For a brief moment, his eyes met Victoria's through the glass. There was something in his expression, knowledge, pity. But Victoria was too consumed by her crisis to pay attention to a maintenance worker. 60 seconds, David whispered. Victoria Sterling, who'd negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs and stared down hostile takeover attempts, felt her hands tremble. She'd built her empire on always being prepared, on never showing weakness. Now, in the most important moment of her career, she was about to fail because of something as basic as language. The elevator chimed again. Closer now. Zhang Wei and his entourage would emerge any second. Places, everyone, Victoria commanded, smoothing her dress and forcing her CEO mask back into place. If we're going down, we go down with dignity. But she didn't notice the janitor had stopped just outside the conference room, his hand resting thoughtfully on his cart as he watched the executives prepare for their doom. Marcus Washington pushed his maintenance cart down the hallway with practiced ease, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. At 53, he'd perfected the art of being invisible in plain sight. Executives rushed past him without a glance, their expensive shoes clicking urgently as they dealt with whatever crisis was consuming the 42nd floor today. He'd been cleaning these offices for 3 years now, ever since, well, since everything changed. The earbuds in his ears weren't playing music, they rarely did. Instead, he listened to a Mandarin language podcast discussing international trade regulations. It was his way of keeping his mind sharp, even if his current position didn't require anything more challenging than knowing which cleaning solution worked best on marble. Marcus. Tommy Chin called out from the supply closet. Tommy was one of the few people in the building who actually knew his name. You finishing up the executive floor? Almost done, Marcus replied, his voice carrying a hint of an accent that most people couldn't quite place, a blend of educated southern roots and years of international travel. Just need to empty the conference room trash bins. Big meeting today, Tommy said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. That Chinese billionaire. Man, must be nice to have that kind of money, huh? Marcus nodded noncommittally. He'd met Zhang Wei once, years ago, at a UN trade summit in Geneva. Zhang had been ascending then, a brilliant entrepreneur with a vision for connecting Eastern and Western technology markets. Marcus had interpreted for the American delegation during those negotiations. But that was a lifetime ago, back when Dr. Marcus Washington was somebody who mattered. He returned to his work, muscle memory guiding his movements while his mind wandered. Through the executive floor's glass walls, he could see the city stretching out below. Somewhere in that maze of buildings was the hospital where Denise spent her final days. The bills from her cancer treatment had devoured their savings, their retirement, everything. Even with his government pension, it hadn't been enough. The house was gone, sold to pay for one more round of chemotherapy that ultimately didn't work. After Denise died, the consulting offers had dried up. 50 was apparently too old to start over in the diplomatic corps, regardless of his 20 years of experience. Overqualified became the polite way of saying, too old, too expensive. Pride had kept him from reaching out to former colleagues, and grief had made him withdraw from the international community he'd once navigated with ease. So here he was, pushing a mop bucket through halls where he'd once been invited as an honored guest. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd interpreted for presidents and prime ministers, had been trusted with secrets that could move markets, and now he was trusted with the key to the supply closet. Excuse me, a young analyst said, stepping around him without looking up from her phone. Marcus moved aside, accustomed to being treated like furniture. It was almost amusing how invisible a uniform could make you. These people trusted him with their space, left sensitive documents on their desks, conducted confidential calls while he cleaned, all because they never really saw him. He caught fragments of conversation from the conference room as he approached. The executives were in full crisis mode about the translator situation. Marcus slowed his pace, pretending to check his supplies while listening. Victoria Sterling's voice carried clearly, sharp, demanding, increasingly desperate. A memory surfaced, his last major assignment before Denise got sick. He'd been interpreting for a trade delegation in Beijing, facilitating discussions about intellectual property rights in emerging technologies. The Chinese lead negotiator had complimented his flawless accent, his understanding of not just the language but the cultural nuances that could make or break a deal. You speak Mandarin like a poet, the man had said, but you negotiate like a warrior. Now he spoke Mandarin to himself and negotiated only with stubborn stains. Marcus entered the conference room to empty the waste baskets. The executives were too focused on their phones to notice him. He moved efficiently, quietly, catching more details of their predicament. Zhang Wei was coming here, to this very room. The same Zhang Wei who'd once shared a bottle of Baijiu with him after successfully concluding a semiconductor agreement. He could help them. The solution to their crisis was literally standing in the room, invisible in his gray uniform. All he had to do was speak up, reveal his capabilities, save their deal. But something held him back. 3 years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated as less than human, it built up walls that weren't easily torn down. Through the window, he saw Victoria Sterling pacing, her blonde hair catching the afternoon light. She'd walked past him hundreds of times, never once making eye contact, never acknowledging his existence beyond the occasional impatient gesture when he was cleaning something she needed to use. Would she even believe him if he offered help? Or would she assume the janitor was delusional, perhaps mentally ill, claiming to speak fluent Mandarin? Marcus finished with the wastebaskets and moved to wipe down the conference table. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surface, a black man in his 50s, wearing a janitor's uniform, pushing a cart full of cleaning supplies. Not exactly the image of a professional interpreter who'd once held security clearance at the highest levels of government. The elevator chimed in the distance. That would be Zhang Wei arriving. Marcus recognized the pattern: early arrival, testing his host's preparedness. It was a classic power move, one Marcus had advised American executives about dozens of times. He wondered if anyone had warned Victoria Sterling. He gathered his supplies slowly, part of him wanting to stay and watch the disaster unfold, another part feeling genuine sympathy for the panicking executives. They weren't bad people, just typical, so focused on their own world they couldn't imagine that someone like him might have something to offer beyond clean floors and empty trash cans. As he pushed his cart toward the door, Marcus made a decision. He would finish his rounds, clock out at his usual time, and go home to his small apartment where Denise's photograph still sat on the mantel. Tomorrow, he'd come back and clean these same offices, listen to these same people ignore him, and life would continue as it had for 3 years. But something nagged at him. Zhang Wei was a good man, despite his reputation for being demanding. He deserved better than whatever disaster was about to unfold in that conference room. And perhaps, after all this time being invisible, Marcus deserved a chance to be seen again. He paused at the doorway, looking back at the conference table where careers would soon die. The earbuds were still in his ears, the Mandarin podcast discussing the importance of trust in international business relationships. Trust. Such a simple concept, yet so hard to establish across cultural and linguistic barriers. Marcus removed his earbuds slowly, thinking. Timing was everything in diplomacy. The question was, had the time finally come to stop being invisible? Zhang Wei's entourage had just entered the building. Victoria could see them on the security monitor, 5 people in impeccable suits, moving with the confidence of those who controlled billions. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she made one last desperate attempt to find a solution. "James, try the embassy again," she ordered, but her voice had lost its earlier edge. Defeat was creeping in. That's when Marcus made his decision. He set down his cleaning supplies and walked toward the conference room. His stride was different now, more purposeful, less invisible. 3 years of silence were about to end. "Excuse me, Miss Sterling," he said, his voice carrying an unexpected resonance. Victoria spun around, her eyes flashing with irritation. "Not now. Can't you see we're in the middle of a crisis?" "I understand," Marcus continued calmly. "That's why I'm offering to help. I speak fluent Mandarin." The room fell silent. James was the first to laugh, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "The janitor speaks Mandarin. What's next? The security guard is a rocket scientist." Victoria's face shifted from annoyance to anger. "This is not the time for jokes. Get back to your cleaning before I have security escort you out." "I'm serious," Marcus insisted, maintaining his composure despite the dismissal. "I can interpret for your meeting with Mr. Zhang." "Listen," Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I don't have time for delusional maintenance staff. Zhang Wei needs someone who understands international business, technology transfers, legal terminology." "I understand all of that," Marcus interrupted gently. "I've interpreted such negotiations before." James moved between them, his face red with indignation. "How dare you interrupt Ms. Sterling? You push a mop for a living. You empty trash cans. And you expect us to believe you can handle a $2 billion negotiation?" "Security!" Victoria called out, her patience exhausted. "We have a situation in the executive conference room." 2 guards appeared within seconds, Tom Bradley and Mike Harrison, both of whom knew Marcus well. They looked uncomfortable as they entered. "Tom, Mike," Victoria commanded, "please remove this man from the floor. He's harassing us during a critical meeting." Tom shifted awkwardly. "Marcus? Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Marcus replied calmly. "I was just offering to help with their translator situation." Mike suppressed what might have been a smile. He'd heard Marcus speaking different languages during his rounds, had even asked him about it once. But he knew better than to contradict an executive. "You need to leave, Marcus," Tom said apologetically. "Wait," Marcus said, holding up a hand. He turned to Victoria and, in perfect Mandarin, said, "Your guest Mr. Zhang values preparedness and respect above all else. Without proper translation, you'll not only lose this deal but damage Meridian's reputation throughout the Asian market. I can prevent that." Victoria blinked, momentarily stunned. It sounded like Chinese, but for all she knew, he could be spouting gibberish. "James, did that sound like, how would I know?" James snapped. "For all we know, he learned a few phrases from a language app. This is ridiculous." The elevator chimed. Zhang Wei was on their floor. "Please," Marcus said quietly, reverting to English. "I know you have no reason to trust me. But in 30 seconds, Mr. Zhang will walk through that door expecting to conduct business in his native language. You have nothing to lose by letting me try." "We have everything to lose." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "Our reputation, our credibility. I can't present a janitor as our corporate interpreter. What would that say about Meridian? What does it say about Meridian that you'd rather fail than accept help from someone you deem beneath you?" Marcus asked softly. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Victoria's face flushed, but whether from anger or shame, it was hard to tell. "Get him out of here," she commanded, turning away. "Now." Tom and Mike moved toward Marcus apologetically. "Come on, man," Mike murmured. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Marcus nodded, maintaining his dignity even in dismissal. "Of course. I apologize for the interruption." As the security guards escorted him toward the service elevator, Marcus heard the main elevator doors open. Zhang Wei's voice carried down the hall, authoritative, speaking rapid Mandarin to his associates. Marcus understood every word. Zhang was commenting on the building's architecture, comparing it favorably to his own headquarters in Shanghai. "Marcus," Tom whispered as they waited for the service elevator, "you really speak Chinese?" "Among other languages," Marcus replied quietly. Mike shook his head. "Man, they're about to crash and burn in there. You could have saved them." "Only if they wanted to be saved," Marcus said. The service elevator doors opened, but Marcus paused. Through the glass walls, he could see Zhang Wei entering the conference room, Victoria and James rising to greet him with forced smiles and awkward bows. Zhang's expression was already cooling as he realized no interpreter was present. "You know what," Tom said suddenly. "I need to use the restroom. Mike, why don't you make sure Marcus gets to the service elevator, eventually?" Mike caught on. "Yeah, sure. Real slow elevator today. Might take a while." They lingered near the service area, all three men watching the disaster unfold in the conference room. Zhang Wei had switched to Mandarin entirely, his tone growing increasingly irritated. Victoria kept smiling and nodding, clearly understanding nothing. James attempted to pull up what appeared to be a translation app on his phone, earning a look of disdain from the Chinese billionaire. "This is painful to watch," Mike muttered. Marcus said nothing, but his hands tightened slightly on his cart handle. Inside the conference room, Zhang Wei stood abruptly, gesturing to his entourage. The meeting was ending before it had begun. 2 years of negotiation, millions in preparation, about to evaporate because of prejudice and pride. "Last chance," Tom said quietly. "We could accidentally head back that way." Marcus shook his head. They made their choice. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. As the service elevator finally arrived, Marcus caught one last glimpse of Victoria Sterling. Her CEO mask had slipped completely, replaced by naked panic as she watched $2 billion walk toward the door. She was speaking rapidly, desperately, making promises she couldn't keep in a language Zhang Wei chose not to understand. The elevator doors closed on the scene, but Marcus knew the story was far from over. Zhang Wei hadn't left yet, he was too polite for that. He would give them one more chance to show respect, to find a solution. And Marcus would be ready. Because while they dismissed him, he hadn't gone far. Sometimes the best position was just out of sight, waiting for the moment when pride finally gave way to desperation. As the elevator descended, Marcus thought about the Mandarin phrase, crisis. It contained two characters, danger and opportunity. Victoria Sterling was about to discover just how true that ancient wisdom could be. The main elevator doors opened with a soft chime that might as well have been a death knell. Zhang Wei stepped out first, his presence immediately commanding the space. At 62, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. His charcoal Armani suit was understated but impeccable, his silver hair precisely styled. Four associates flanked him, each radiating the same aura of controlled power. Victoria forced her brightest smile, extending her hand. Mr. Zhang, welcome to Meridian Technologies. We're honored by your presence. Zhang Wei regarded her hand for a moment before accepting it with a brief shake. His dark eyes swept the conference room, taking in every detail, the nervous energy, the absence of a translator, the barely concealed panic on James's face. Ms. Sterling, he said in accented but clear English. Then, switching to rapid Mandarin, he continued speaking while maintaining eye contact with her. Victoria's smile froze. She caught perhaps one word in 10, something about expectations and preparation. James stepped forward with his phone, but Victoria grabbed his wrist, stopping him. Using a translation app would be worse than admitting defeat. Please, Mr. Zhang, she gestured toward the conference room, shall we sit? We have tea prepared, your favorite pu'er from Yunnan province. Zhang Wei's expression didn't change, but he spoke again in Mandarin, this time to his lead associate, a severe-looking woman who took notes on a tablet. The only word Victoria recognized was meridian, and the tone wasn't encouraging. They filed into the conference room, the Chinese delegation taking one side of the table while Victoria and James sat opposite. David hovered nervously, pouring tea with shaking hands. The silence stretched unbearably as Zhang Wei sipped his tea, continuing to speak exclusively in Mandarin to his team. Meanwhile, 3 floors down, Marcus had convinced Tom and Mike to let him stay in the building. My shift doesn't end for another hour anyway, he reasoned. I'll just finish the lower floors. But instead of heading to the lower floors, he made his way to the maintenance room on the executive level. It had a small window that overlooked the conference room, used for checking when rooms were empty for cleaning. Marcus positioned himself where he could see but not be seen. The scene inside was excruciating. Zhang Wei had pulled out a thick folder, the contracts, presumably, and was discussing them in Mandarin with his legal advisor. Victoria and James sat frozen, understanding nothing, unable to participate in discussions about their own deal. Mr. Zhang, Victoria attempted, if we could perhaps conduct this portion in English. Zhang Wei's eyes flashed. He set down his teacup with deliberate precision and spoke in English for the first time since arriving. Ms. Sterling, I specifically requested this meeting be conducted in Mandarin. This was confirmed 3 weeks ago. Are you telling me you failed to arrange proper translation? There was an emergency, Victoria began. In China, Zhang Wei interrupted, we have a saying, the prepared bird catches the worm, but the prepared hunter catches the bird. Which are you, Ms. Sterling? The bird or the hunter? James leaned forward. Mr. Zhang, surely we can. Zhang Wei held up a hand, silencing him. He returned to Mandarin, his tone growing colder. Marcus could understand every word from his vantage point. This is exactly what I expected from American companies. Arrogance. Assumption that everyone should accommodate them. No respect for our language, our culture. One of Zhang's associates, the legal advisor, added, "Should we terminate negotiations now, or allow them to embarrass themselves further?" "Let them struggle a bit longer," Zhang Wei replied in Mandarin. "I'm curious to see how low they'll stoop." Victoria, understanding none of this, maintained her increasingly desperate smile. "Mr. Zhang, I assure you, Meridian Technologies values our partnership above all else. If we could just discuss the technical specifications." Zhang Wei switched back to English. "Discuss? How can we discuss when you cannot understand me, and I choose not to understand you?" He stood abruptly. "This meeting is over." "Wait." Victoria rose as well, her composure finally cracking. "Please, Mr. Zhang. 2 years of negotiation were apparently not important enough to ensure proper translation," Zhang Wei finished. "Good day, Ms. Sterling." As the Chinese delegation moved toward the door, Marcus made a decision. He quickly made his way to the main hallway, timing it so he'd be pushing his cart past the conference room just as they exited. Zhang Wei emerged first, his face set in cold disapproval. As he passed Marcus, the janitor spoke quietly in perfect Mandarin, "Mr. Zhang, forgive the interruption, but the disrespect shown to you today does not reflect the true spirit of all Americans." Zhang Wei stopped dead in his tracks. His associates bumped into him, startled by the sudden halt. The billionaire turned slowly, his eyes wide as he stared at the janitor. "You speak Mandarin," Zhang Wei said, not a question but a statement of disbelief. "I do," Marcus replied in Mandarin, bowing slightly. "And I deeply regret the loss of face you've experienced today." Victoria and James had followed them out, watching the exchange in confusion. "What's happening?" Victoria demanded. "What is he saying?" Zhang Wei ignored her, stepping closer to Marcus. "Your accent, it's not just fluent. It's educated. Diplomatic." Marcus straightened slightly. "You have a good ear, Mr. Zhang." "Who are you?" Zhang Wei asked, still in Mandarin. "Today? I'm just a man who cleans offices," Marcus replied. "But I was once someone who believed in building bridges between East and West." Zhang Wei's eyes narrowed, studying Marcus intently. Something flickered in his expression, not quite recognition, but something close. "Wait," he said suddenly, switching to English. "Geneva. 2018, the Semiconductor Trade Summit." Marcus inclined his head slightly. "You have an excellent memory, Mr. Zhang." "Dr. Washington?" Zhang Wei's voice rose in shock. "Dr. Marcus Washington? You were the lead interpreter for the American delegation." The hallway fell completely silent. Victoria's mouth opened but no sound came out. James looked like he'd been slapped. Even Zhang Wei's associates were staring. "That was a long time ago," Marcus said quietly. "You helped negotiate the Pacific Technology Alliance." Zhang Wei continued, his cold demeanor melting into astonishment. "You were the one who found the compromise on intellectual property that saved the entire deal. What are you doing?" He gestured at the janitor's uniform, words failing him. "Life takes unexpected turns," Marcus said simply. Zhang Wei turned to Victoria, his expression shifting from shock to something darker. "This man, this Dr. Washington, is one of the finest interpreters and negotiators I've ever encountered. And he's been here, in your building, cleaning your offices." Victoria found her voice. We didn't know." "Didn't know? Or didn't care to know?" Zhang Wei's voice could have frozen fire. "He offered to help you, didn't he? And you dismissed him because of this?" He gestured at Marcus's uniform. "Mr. Zhang," Marcus interjected gently, "perhaps we could." "No," Zhang Wei said firmly. "I want to hear her answer." "Ms. Sterling, did this man offer to interpret for our meeting? Victoria's face had gone pale. Yes, but we couldn't verify his credentials, and he's a janitor, James blurted out. We couldn't present a member of the cleaning staff as our corporate interpreter. The silence that followed was deafening. Zhang Wei's expression cycled through disbelief, disgust, and finally, cold fury. So you would rather lose billions than accept help from someone you consider beneath you, he said slowly. You would rather insult me and waste my time than overcome your prejudice. It wasn't like that, Victoria started. It was exactly like that, Zhang Wei cut her off. He turned back to Marcus. Dr. Washington, would you do me the honor of joining us for tea? Not here, he added with a dismissive glance at the conference room. Somewhere with better company. Marcus hesitated. Mr. Zhang, I appreciate the gesture, but, please, Zhang Wei said, and for the first time, his voice held warmth. It would be my privilege. As Zhang Wei's entourage reorganized around this unexpected development, Victoria Sterling stood frozen in her own hallway, watching her $2 billion deal potentially walk away with the janitor she'd dismissed less than an hour ago. The hunter had become the bird, and the bird, it seemed, had just revealed itself to be an eagle. Dr. Washington, Zhang Wei said, switching back to Mandarin, before we leave, I'm curious about something. His eyes gleamed with an expression Victoria couldn't read. These people dismissed you, humiliated you. Why should I not simply walk away and let them suffer the consequences? Marcus glanced at Victoria and James, who stood frozen, understanding nothing of the conversation. He replied in Mandarin, his voice thoughtful, because, Mr. Zhang, the measure of a man isn't in how he treats those above him, but how he treats those below. And perhaps, because good business should transcend personal prejudice. Zhang Wei raised an eyebrow. You would help them? After what just happened? I would help you, Marcus corrected gently. You came here in good faith for a business discussion. You deserve to have your time respected, regardless of Ms. Sterling's failures. A slow smile spread across Zhang Wei's face. I'd forgotten your diplomatic wisdom. Very well. He turned to Victoria, switching to English. Dr. Washington has convinced me to give you one more chance. We will return to the conference room, but only if he handles the interpretation. Victoria's mind raced. The janitor, Dr. Washington, stood there in his gray uniform, holding a mop bucket, yet somehow commanding the respect of one of Asia's most powerful businessmen. Of course, she managed. We would be honored. I have conditions, Marcus interrupted quietly. Everyone turned to stare at him. James's face reddened. Conditions? You're a janitor. James, Zhang Wei's voice was sharp as a blade. If you interrupt Dr. Washington again, I will ensure that every company in Asia knows exactly why this deal failed. Please continue, Doctor. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies. First, I'll need a few minutes to review the contracts and technical specifications. Second, I'll need assurance that my interpretation will be followed without interference. And third, he looked directly at Victoria, I'll need a proper workspace. I can't effectively interpret while standing next to a mop bucket. Anything, Victoria said quickly. David, get Dr. Washington whatever he needs. As they filed back into the conference room, Zhang Wei walked beside Marcus, speaking in rapid Mandarin. I must confess, when I saw you, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. How did you end up here? My wife, Denise, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 4 years ago, Marcus replied quietly in Mandarin. The treatments exhausted our savings. After she passed, I needed work. At 50, with a gap in my resume. He shrugged. Meridian had openings in maintenance. It pays the bills. Zhang Wei's expression softened. I'm sorry for your loss. Denise was a remarkable woman. I remember meeting her at the Geneva summit. She spoke highly of you as well, Marcus said. She particularly enjoyed your discussion about classical Chinese poetry. They took their seats, but the dynamic had completely shifted. Zhang Wei sat at the head of the table, with Marcus beside him. Victoria and James were relegated to the sides, observers in their own negotiation. David rushed in with copies of the contracts and technical specifications. Marcus put on his wire-rimmed glasses and began reviewing them with the same meticulous attention he'd once applied to international treaties. As he read, he occasionally made notes in the margins, in both English and Chinese characters. Impressive, Zhang Wei commented, watching Marcus work. Your written Chinese has actually improved since Geneva. I've had time to practice, Marcus replied. Night shifts are quiet. I study to keep my mind sharp. Victoria watched this exchange, understanding only the English portions but recognizing the respect in Zhang Wei's tone. The man she'd walked past hundreds of times, whose existence she'd barely acknowledged, was demonstrating expertise she couldn't have imagined. I'm ready, Marcus announced after 10 minutes. He'd removed his janitor's uniform shirt, revealing a clean white undershirt. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than the gray uniform. Shall we begin? Zhang Wei nodded and launched into rapid Mandarin, outlining his vision for the partnership. Marcus interpreted flawlessly, not just translating words but conveying the nuance, the emotion, the subtle implications that machine translation could never capture. Mr. Zhang sees this partnership as more than a business arrangement, Marcus interpreted. He views it as a bridge between two technological philosophies. The Eastern approach, which values collective advancement and long-term sustainability, married with Western innovation and rapid iteration. However, he has concerns about Meridian's corporate culture, specifically regarding diversity and inclusion. Victoria started to respond, but Marcus held up a hand. He's not finished. Zhang Wei continued, his tone growing more serious. Marcus translated, today's incident has raised serious questions about whether Meridian is ready for global partnership. In China, we judge a company not by its profits alone, but by how it treats all members of society. The fact that someone of Dr. Washington's caliber was cleaning your offices while you desperately needed his skills suggests a fundamental blindness to human potential. James shifted uncomfortably. Victoria's face was stone, but her knuckles were white as she gripped her pen. However, Marcus continued interpreting, Mr. Zhang is willing to proceed with negotiations if certain conditions are met. First, he wants assurances about Meridian's commitment to recognizing talent regardless of position or appearance. Second, he requires a cultural liaison for the Asian expansion, someone who understands both business and cultural nuances. We can certainly commit to improving our diversity initiatives, Victoria began, but Zhang Wei was already shaking his head. He spoke again, and Marcus translated, Mr. Zhang isn't interested in empty promises or PR initiatives. He wants concrete action. Specifically. Marcus paused, a slight smile playing at his lips as he continued, he wants to know why Meridian's executive team has no racial diversity, why your board is 90% male, and why someone with my qualifications was only seen fit to clean your bathrooms. The questions hung in the air like an indictment. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, then finally managed, these are complex issues. The answers are quite simple, Zhang Wei said in English, surprising everyone. Either you value talent wherever it appears, or you don't. Either you see people, or you see uniforms. Which is it, Ms. Sterling? As Victoria struggled to formulate a response, Marcus continued his flawless interpretation, bridging not just languages but worlds. The janitor who'd been invisible an hour ago was now the most essential person in the room, and everyone knew it. The revelation was just beginning, and it would change everything, not just for this deal, but for everyone watching a lifetime of assumptions crumble before their eyes. Zhang Wei leaned back in his chair, studying Victoria's flustered response with calculating eyes. Then he turned to Marcus and spoke in Mandarin, his tone conversational but his words carrying weight. Marcus translated, Mr. Zhang would like to share a story. He says that in 1987, he was a young engineer presenting at a technology conference in Seattle. His English was poor, and the American executives laughed at his pronunciation. One person didn't laugh, a black woman who worked in the hotel's catering department. She spent her break helping him practice his presentation. That woman's kindness changed his life. He wonders if Meridian would have hired her for anything beyond serving coffee. The room fell silent. Zhang Wei continued in Mandarin, but now he was looking directly at Marcus. "Wait," he said suddenly, switching to English. "Dr. Washington, you were at the Belgrade conference in 2016. The cybersecurity protocols negotiation." Marcus nodded slightly. "I was. You were the one who broke the deadlock between the EU and Chinese positions on data sovereignty." Zhang Wei's voice rose with recognition. "That was brilliant work. The Washington framework is still used as a model for international tech agreements." James's tablet slipped from his hands, clattering on the table. Victoria's expression cycled between shock and something that might have been shame. Elena Rodriguez knocked and entered with her laptop. "Ms. Sterling, you asked me to research." She stopped, seeing Marcus at the negotiation table. "What did you find?" Victoria asked quietly. Elena looked uncomfortable. "Dr. Marcus Washington, former chief interpreter for the State Department's Technology and Trade Division. Fluent in Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, Korean, French, and Arabic. Master's degree in International Relations from Georgetown, secondary master's in Computational Linguistics from MIT. 23 years of service, including." She paused, 16 presidential commendations for exceptional service. "Continue," Zhang Wei commanded. He was the lead interpreter for the Trans-Pacific Technology Accords, the Seoul AI Ethics Summit, and the Beijing Intellectual Property Convention. Retired early in 2021 to care for his terminally ill wife. His last known position was. Elena's voice trailed off. "Was what?" Victoria demanded. "Custodial Services, Meridian Technologies. Hired June 2022. Starting salary, $15.50 per hour." The silence that followed was deafening. Zhang Wei's face had gone cold, but his anger wasn't directed at Marcus. $15.50, he repeated slowly. "You paid one of America's finest diplomatic minds minimum wage to clean toilets." "We didn't know," Victoria said weakly. "Because you didn't ask," Zhang Wei snapped. "Because you saw a black man applying for a janitor position and made assumptions. How many others, Ms. Sterling? How many brilliant minds are mopping your floors because you can't see past your prejudices?" Marcus intervened gently. "Mr. Zhang, perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand." "No," Zhang Wei said firmly. "This is the matter at hand. I don't just invest in companies, Dr. Washington. I invest in cultures, in futures. And what I see here is a culture that wastes human potential on an epic scale." He pulled out his phone and made a rapid call in Mandarin. Marcus didn't translate, but Victoria caught mentions of Meridian and what sounded like instructions. "My team is pulling all our preliminary agreements," Zhang Wei announced after hanging up. "Not just this deal, all potential partnerships with Meridian Technologies." "Mr. Zhang, please," Victoria started. However, Zhang Wei continued, "I'm willing to reconsider under one condition." He looked at Marcus. "I want him." "I'm sorry." Victoria blinked. "Dr. Washington. I want him as my cultural liaison for all North American operations. I'll triple whatever you're paying him. Actually, given what you're paying him, let's make it 10 times. Plus benefits, relocation assistance, and a signing bonus that reflects his actual worth." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Mr. Zhang, I'm flattered, but 20 times, Zhang Wei said flatly. "And a position on my advisory board. Dr. Washington, you're wasting away here. These people had you cleaning their offices while they desperately needed your skills. They had gold in their hands and used it as a doorstop." Victoria found her voice. "Dr. Washington is our employee. We can't simply." "Your janitor," James corrected without thinking, then immediately realized his mistake. Zhang Wei's smile was predatory. Yes, exactly. Your janitor. The one you were ready to have security remove. The one you wouldn't listen to even as your deal collapsed. Tell me, Miss Sterling, what possible claim could you have on his loyalty? Marcus stood slowly. If I may speak for myself. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. 3 years ago, I lost everything that mattered to me. My wife, my savings, my career, my dignity. I took this job because I needed to survive, but also because work, any work, gave me purpose when I had none. He walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I've cleaned these offices, maintained these spaces, made myself invisible because that's what was expected. But I've also listened. I've heard the deals being made, the dismissive comments about those people, the assumptions that education and intelligence only exist in certain packages. Turning back to face them, Marcus continued. Mr. Zhang, your offer is generous, but I need to think about more than money. Ms. Sterling, you ask what claim you have on my loyalty. None. But Meridian employs 47 other maintenance staff, many of whom have their own hidden stories, their own untapped potential. What happens to them if I simply leave? Zhang Wei nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. You're negotiating. Not for yourself, but for them. Someone should, Marcus said simply. Victoria's mind was racing. The deal, the implications, the lawsuit potential if Zhang Wei went public with this story, it was all crashing down around her. But worse than the business consequences was the growing realization of what she'd been blind to. What do you want? She asked Marcus directly. Finish the negotiation, Marcus replied. Let Mr. Zhang see that Meridian can be more than its mistakes. Show him that American companies can recognize their failures and grow from them. And then. He paused, then we can discuss what comes next. Zhang Wei considered this, then smiled, a genuine expression this time. Dr. Washington, you remain the diplomat. Very well. Let's continue the negotiation. But understand this, Ms. Sterling, I'll be watching how you handle what comes after. The deal is one thing. What you do with the lesson Dr. Washington has taught you today. That's what will determine our future partnership. As they returned to the contracts, Marcus seamlessly switching between languages, Victoria Sterling faced an uncomfortable truth. The most valuable person in the room had been there all along, invisible by her own choice to not see him. The hidden depths of those they overlooked could either sink them or save them. Today, Marcus Washington was choosing to save them. The question was, would they be smart enough to finally see him and others like him for who they really were? As the negotiation progressed, Elena Rodriguez remained in the conference room, her laptop open, discovering more with each search. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as she dug deeper into Marcus Washington's background. Ms. Sterling, she interrupted quietly, sliding her laptop over. You need to see this. Victoria glanced at the screen while Marcus continued interpreting Zhang Wei's technical requirements. What she saw made her stomach drop. The headlines told a story of brilliance and tragedy. State Department star interpreter bridges impossible divide in Seoul Tech Summit, 2019. Dr. Marcus Washington receives Presidential Medal for Diplomatic Excellence, 2018. Personal tragedy, lead diplomat steps down to care for dying wife, 2021. Medical debt crisis, how even government service doesn't guarantee healthcare security, 2022. But it was the last article that made Victoria's hands tremble. From the State Department to the streets, former diplomat loses home to medical bankruptcy, 2022. Elena whispered, he didn't just retire. His wife's cancer treatments cost over $2 million. Insurance covered less than half. He sold everything, their house, his retirement funds, even his book collection. There's a photo. Victoria looked. The image showed Marcus in a suit, standing beside a small, elegant black woman in a hospital bed. Despite the circumstances, both were smiling. The caption read, Dr. Marcus Washington with wife Denise, 2 weeks before her passing. The couple was married for 28 years. There's more, Elena continued, her voice barely audible. After his wife died, he applied to 43 companies. Overqualified for everything, too old for new positions, gap in employment made him risky. He was living in his car when he applied here. James, reading over Victoria's shoulder, had gone pale. We hired him at minimum wage. No benefits for the first year. He never complained, Elena added. Perfect attendance record. Several employees mentioned he helps them with their kids' homework, especially foreign language assignments. The security logs show he often stays late, not for overtime, but to use our computers. He's been taking online courses, trying to stay current with technology trends. Zhang Wei, noticing the whispered conference, paused his discussion. Is there a problem? Marcus, ever professional, answered in Mandarin first, then English. Mr. Zhang asks if everything is all right. Victoria looked at Marcus, really looked at him for the first time. The lines around his eyes spoke of laughter and loss. His hands, now gesturing gracefully as he interpreted, bore the calluses of manual labor over the manicure of his former profession. This was a man who'd advised presidents, who'd shaped international policy, who'd been reduced to mopping floors, and he'd done it with dignity. Dr. Washington, Victoria said, her voice unsteady. Why didn't you tell us? When you applied, why didn't you mention your background? Marcus paused in his interpretation. I did. It's all on my application. Elena quickly pulled up the HR records. There it was, in black and white, his entire career history, meticulously documented. At the bottom, a note from the hiring manager, overqualified for requested position, but desperate. Seems stable. Recommend hire for janitorial staff, he won't last long anyway. The hiring manager thought you'd quit within a month, Elena read. He wrote, PhD types don't stick with real work. Zhang Wei had been following the English portions of the conversation. Now he spoke directly to Victoria, this is why I hesitate to do business with American companies. Not because you lack innovation or capital, but because you waste human resources on a scale that would be criminal in Shanghai. Do you know what would happen if my company overlooked talent like Dr. Washington? Victoria shook her head mutely. We would fail, Zhang Wei said simply. In global business, the company that best utilizes all available talent wins. You had a strategic asset cleaning your bathrooms while paying consultants millions for inferior insights. The consulting firms, Marcus said quietly, a slight smile playing at his lips. I've read some of their reports on Asian market penetration. Fascinating how they manage to be wrong about almost everything. You've been reading our strategic documents? James asked, alarmed. They're often left on desks when I clean, Marcus replied mildly. The McKenna report on Chinese tech adoption, for instance. They recommended avoiding partnerships with companies like Mr. Zhang's, calling them structurally incompatible with Western business models. Zhang Wei laughed, a sharp, genuine sound. McKenna? They told me the same about American companies. How much did you pay for that advice? $3 million, Victoria admitted. And how much do you pay Dr. Washington annually? Elena did the calculation. $32,240. Before taxes. So for the price of bad advice, you could have employed Dr. Washington for 93 years, Zhang Wei mused. Fascinating economics. Marcus steered the conversation back to the negotiation, but the damage was done. Everyone in the room was recalculating, reassessing, recognizing the magnitude of what had been missed. As Marcus interpreted the final technical specifications, Elena continued her research. She found academic papers he'd published, conferences where he'd been keynote speaker, testimonials from world leaders praising his skill. She found the Reddit thread where former colleagues expressed shock at his disappearance from diplomatic circles. She found the GoFundMe for his wife's treatment, which had raised less than $10,000. But most damning of all, she found Meridian's own diversity reports, claiming they actively sought talent from all backgrounds and provided opportunities for advancement regardless of race or origin. Dr. Washington, Victoria said when there was a natural break in the negotiation. I owe you an apology. Not just for today, but for the last 3 years. Marcus's expression remained neutral. Apologies are words, Ms. Sterling. What matters is what comes next. Indeed, Zhang Wei agreed. And speaking of what comes next, I have a proposal. But first, Dr. Washington, I must know, why did you really stay here? With your credentials, even with the employment gap, you had options. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, my wife and I used to walk past this building when it was being constructed. She said it looked like it was reaching for the sky, trying to touch something greater. After she died, I needed. He paused, searching for words. I needed to be somewhere she had seen, somewhere her memory lived. Even if I was invisible here, I was close to her. The conference room fell silent. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Inside, 7 people sat with the weight of revealed truth, understanding that some forms of blindness were chosen, and some forms of sight came at the cost of comfortable illusions. Zhang Wei broke the silence. Dr. Washington, Ms. Sterling, I have a proposition that might benefit everyone. But first, Ms. Sterling must answer a question: what is Meridian Technologies willing to do to prove it can see clearly now? The truth had unfolded like an origami crane, each revelation reshaping what came before. Now it was time to see whether that truth would transform or merely decorate the corporate landscape of Meridian Technologies. Zhang Wei stood abruptly, his movement commanding instant attention. I've made my decision, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of billions. But first, there are consequences to address. He turned to James Thornton, who visibly shrank under his gaze. You, Mr. Thornton. You laughed when Dr. Washington offered help. You called security on a man trying to save your deal. What does that say about your judgment as Chief Operating Officer? James's face flushed red. I was protecting our company's interests, by rejecting expertise because it came in the wrong package. Zhang Wei's voice could have frozen flame. In my companies, such blindness would be considered gross incompetence. Victoria intervened. Mr. Zhang, James is a valuable member of our team, is he? Zhang Wei pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. My team has been researching Meridian while we've been talking. Interesting patterns emerge. Mr. Thornton, you've been COO for 5 years. In that time, how many black executives have been promoted to senior positions? James's mouth opened and closed like a fish. We don't keep track of. 0, Elena supplied quietly, looking at her laptop. 0 black executives promoted to senior positions in 5 years. 17 left for competitors, citing cultural barriers to advancement. But that's not, James started. Also interesting, Zhang Wei continued, reading from his phone, internal emails my team acquired, legally, through public records from your recent lawsuit settlements. Mr. Thornton, you wrote, and I quote, we need to be careful about diversity hires diluting our corporate culture. Would you like to explain what you meant? The color drained from James's face. Victoria's eyes widened in shock, she'd never seen those emails. Or this one, Zhang Wei continued relentlessly, the Stanford and Harvard pipeline works fine. Why fix what isn't broken? Written in response to a proposal for recruiting from historically black colleges. Those were taken out of context, James protested. The context seems quite clear, Marcus said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken for himself rather than as interpreter in several minutes. The context is that people like me are invisible to people like you, Mr. Thornton. Not because we lack visibility, but because you lack vision. Zhang Wei nodded approvingly. Precisely. Ms. Sterling, I'll make this simple. Mr. Thornton represents everything wrong with American corporate culture, the comfortable blindness, the casual prejudice, the waste of human potential. If you want this deal, he goes. Today. Now. You can't demand that. James exploded, jumping to his feet. Victoria, this is outrageous. Are you going to let him? Sit down, James, Victoria said quietly. What? I said sit down. Her voice was steel. Mr. Zhang is right. I've been blind too, but at least I can admit it. You're still defending actions that cost us. God knows how much in lost talent and opportunities. This is insane. James looked around the table for support, finding none. You're going to fire me because I didn't recognize some janitor? No, Victoria replied. I'm going to fire you because you've apparently been systematically undermining our diversity efforts while costing us top talent. And yes, because you couldn't recognize expertise when it was standing right in front of you, trying to help. Security to the 42nd floor, Victoria said into the conference phone. Mr. Thornton will be leaving the building. James's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally, ugly resentment. You'll regret this. The board will hear about how your prejudice nearly cost us a $2 billion deal, Victoria cut him off. And how your emails will likely trigger another discrimination lawsuit. Clean out your desk, James. We're done. As security arrived to escort a sputtering James out, Zhang Wei returned to his seat. One obstacle removed. Now, let's discuss the future. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a different set of documents. I'm prepared to sign the original deal, with modifications. First, Meridian will undergo a complete diversity audit by my team. Second, you will create a new position, Chief Diversity and Talent Officer, with real power to change hiring and promotion practices. Third, Dr. Washington will serve as cultural liaison for all our joint ventures. I haven't agreed to that, Marcus said mildly. No, you haven't, Zhang Wei smiled. But you will, because I'm about to make you an offer that serves your true interests. He pulled out another document. The Zhang Wei Foundation is launching a new initiative, the Hidden Talent Project. We'll partner with American companies to identify and elevate overlooked brilliance in their workforce. Dr. Washington, I want you to lead it. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. Full salary, of course, Zhang Wei continued. But more importantly, the power to change lives. To ensure no one else with a PhD mops floors while executives pay millions for bad advice. To make visible the invisible. Interested? And my colleagues here? The other maintenance staff? Marcus asked. Full skills assessment for anyone interested. Training programs, education support, advancement opportunities. We'll pilot it here at Meridian, if Ms. Sterling agrees. Victoria didn't hesitate. Agreed. Zhang Wei pulled out the original contract. Then let's finalize this deal. Dr. Washington, would you do us the honor of continuing to interpret? Although, he smiled, I suspect we understand each other quite clearly now. As they worked through the details, Elena received a message on her laptop. Ms. Sterling, the news about Mr. Thornton's termination has already reached the employee network. Also. She paused, there's a petition. A petition? From the maintenance staff. All 47 of them. They're requesting that Dr. Washington be considered for the COO position. Victoria looked at Marcus, who seemed genuinely surprised. I didn't ask them to. They respect you, Elena said. The petition includes testimonials. How you've helped their kids with homework, advised them on workplace disputes, taught them phrases in different languages. They say you've been their leader all along, just without the title. Zhang Wei laughed with genuine delight. In China, we have a saying, the mountain is high, but the emperor is higher. But sometimes, Ms. Sterling, the emperor is the one carrying water up the mountain, and no one notices because they're too busy looking at the peak. Dr. Washington, Victoria said formally, would you consider? No, Marcus said gently. Not COO. That's not where I'm needed. But Mr. Zhang's proposal, helping others who've been overlooked, identifying talent that's been wasted, building bridges between what is and what could be, that interests me. Then it's settled, Zhang Wei said. We'll sign the technology transfer deal today. The Hidden Talent Project launches next month. And Meridian Technologies becomes our test case for what American business could be if it truly saw all its people. As the sun set over the city, contracts were signed with Marcus translating every word, ensuring nothing was lost between languages or cultures. But the real translation happening in that room was deeper, from blindness to sight, from prejudice to possibility, from waste to wisdom. James Thornton was gone, his box of belongings carried out by security. But in his absence, something new was being built. Not just a business deal, but a reckoning with consequences and a reaching toward redemption. The janitor who'd been invisible that morning had become the architect of Meridian's future. And Victoria Sterling, for all her billions and power, was learning that the most expensive education was recognizing what had been free all along, if only she'd had eyes to see it. 6 months later, the 42nd floor of Meridian Technologies looked the same but felt entirely different. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows that Marcus Washington used to clean, but now he stood before them in a tailored suit, reviewing documents for the Hidden Talent Project's quarterly report. Dr. Washington. A young woman knocked on his office door. Yes, he had an office now, with a view of the city and a photo of Denise on the desk. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Thank you, Sarah. He recognized her, former food service worker, discovered to have a master's in data analytics. She was now a junior analyst in the tech division, one of 37 hidden talents uncovered in the first months of the program. Marcus gathered his materials and headed to the boardroom. The same room where he'd been dismissed and humiliated now welcomed him as an equal. But more importantly, it welcomed the 7 other formerly overlooked employees who'd been promoted after their skills were properly assessed. Victoria Sterling was already there, looking notably different. Gone was the harsh edge, replaced by something more thoughtful. She was reviewing notes with Elena Rodriguez, who'd been promoted to Chief Diversity and Talent Officer, a position with real teeth and a direct line to the board. Marcus, Victoria stood as he entered. Ready for the presentation? Always, he replied, setting up his materials. The board filtered in, including 3 new members, all bringing diverse perspectives that had been sorely lacking before. Before we begin, Victoria addressed the room. I want to note that today marks exactly 6 months since the Zhang Wei partnership was signed. Our Asian expansion has exceeded all projections, thanks largely to Dr. Washington's cultural guidance and the team he's assembled. Marcus nodded graciously but redirected attention. The success belongs to the 53 employees who were promoted internally after skills assessment, and the 120 who entered advancement training programs. Meridian didn't gain new talent, it finally recognized the talent it always had. The presentation began. Sarah, the former food service worker, presented data analytics showing a 34% increase in innovation metrics since the Hidden Talent Project began. A former security guard, now in product development, demonstrated a new app feature he'd designed. A maintenance worker who spoke 4 languages was now leading the international customer service expansion. The financial impact, Marcus continued, speaks for itself. By promoting internally and recognizing existing talent, Meridian saved $12 million in recruitment costs while increasing productivity by 23%. But the real value isn't in numbers. He clicked to the next slide, a photo from the previous week's celebration. Employees from every level of the company, mixing freely, sharing stories. In the center, Zhang Wei raised a glass with several former janitors who now held management positions. The real value, Marcus said, is in becoming a company that sees people, not positions. That values contribution over credentials. That understands brilliance doesn't always arrive in expected packages. Board member Richard Hayes, who'd initially resisted the changes, spoke up. The shareholders have certainly noticed. Stock price is up 18%. The Wall Street Journal called it the Meridian Miracle. There's no miracle, Marcus replied. Just the radical act of actually looking at who's already here. A knock interrupted the meeting. Come in, Victoria called. Tom Bradley, the security guard who'd once escorted Marcus out, entered nervously. But he wore a suit now, not a uniform. Sorry to interrupt. Mr. Zhang just arrived for the partnership review. Zhang Wei entered with his characteristic presence, but his smile was warm as he saw the assembled group. Dr. Washington, Ms. Sterling, everyone. His eyes swept the room, noting the changes. I see the transformation continues. Mr. Zhang, Marcus stood, bowing slightly. Welcome back to Meridian. No need for formality, my friend, Zhang Wei said. I come bearing news. The Hidden Talent Project has attracted attention. 17 other major corporations want to implement similar programs. The question is, are you ready to expand beyond Meridian? Marcus looked at Victoria, who nodded encouragingly. We've discussed this possibility, she said. Dr. Washington has my full support to grow the program nationally, while maintaining his role here. There's one condition, Marcus said. Each company must commit to more than surface changes. Real power for diversity officers, transparent promotion processes, and mandatory bias training starting from the CEO down. Agreed, Zhang Wei said. In fact, I've been so impressed, I'm proposing something bigger. He pulled out a tablet, showing a presentation. The John Washington Institute for Human Potential. A joint venture to study, document, and replicate what you've done here. Funded initially at $100 million. The room fell silent. Marcus stared at the proposal, thinking of Denise, of the days when he'd pushed his mop bucket past these very offices, of all the invisible people still waiting to be seen. I accept, he said quietly. On one condition. Name it. The Institute's first office will be in the Meridian Building's basement, next to the maintenance break room. So we never forget where transformation really begins. Zhang Wei laughed, delighted. Only you would turn down a penthouse office for a basement. Agreed. As the meeting continued, outlining the future of the Hidden Talent Project and the new institute, Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from the current head of maintenance, Doc, 3 of my team just passed their certification exams. They start their new positions Monday. Thank you. He smiled, remembering his own journey from that maintenance closet to this boardroom. But the real victory wasn't his elevation, it was the doors opening throughout the building, throughout the company, throughout the industry. Later, as the meeting concluded and people filtered out, Victoria lingered. Marcus, I need to say something. He waited patiently. That day, 6 months ago, when I refused to see you, it was the worst and best day of my professional life. Worst because it revealed how blind I'd been. Best because it forced me to finally see. She paused. Thank you for saving us from ourselves. You saved yourselves, Marcus replied. You just needed someone to hold up a mirror. Victoria smiled, a real smile, not the CEO mask. Speaking of mirrors, there's something else. The board voted unanimously. Your annual salary has been adjusted to reflect your true value to this company. It's substantial. Marcus looked at the number she showed him and thought of the days when he'd calculated whether he could afford both lunch and bus fare. I appreciate it. But you know what matters more? Yesterday, Carmen from the cleaning crew told me her daughter just got accepted to engineering school. She can afford it now because of her promotion. That's the real return on investment. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in familiar shades of amber and rose, Marcus stood in the office he'd once cleaned. On his desk, beside Denise's photo, sat a small framed quote in Mandarin and English: "The wise leader knows that true power lies in lifting others." His phone rang, another company wanting to implement the hidden talent project. As he answered, he caught sight of the maintenance crew changing shifts in the plaza below. He recognized the rhythm of their movement, the dignity in their work. Soon, someone would see them too. Someone would ask about their dreams, their skills, their hidden depths. The transformation that began with a crisis and a mop bucket had become a movement. But for Marcus Washington, it was simpler than that. It was about honoring Denise's memory by ensuring no one else would be invisible in plain sight. It was about proving that dignity didn't depend on titles, and that brilliance could be found in the most unexpected places. 6 months ago, a billionaire had panicked without a translator, and a janitor had saved the day. But the real story wasn't about rescue, it was about recognition. Not about rising from janitor to executive, but about revealing that the distance between them had always been an illusion, maintained by those who refused to see. As Marcus prepared for the next day's challenges, he passed the executive kitchen. A new janitor was there, methodically cleaning the coffee machine. Marcus stopped. "Good evening," he said. "I'm Marcus Washington." The woman looked up, surprised. People in suits didn't usually talk to her. "Maria Gonzalez," she replied cautiously. "Maria, tell me," Marcus said, pulling up a chair. "What did you do before this?" Her eyes widened slightly. I was a chemical engineer in Honduras. But my credentials don't transfer, and my English." "Your English sounds perfect to me," Marcus said. "Would you be interested in having coffee tomorrow? I'd like to hear more about your background. We have a program that might interest you." As Maria nodded, tears forming in her eyes, Marcus saw the cycle beginning again. Another invisible person about to become visible. Another talent about to be recognized. Another life about to transform. The Hidden Talent Project wasn't just changing Meridian, it was changing how America saw its workforce. One person at a time, one story at a time, one moment of recognition at a time. Marcus Washington had spent 3 years as a janitor, invisible to those who should have seen him. Now, he spent his days making sure no one else would suffer the same blindness. It wasn't just business, it was justice. It wasn't just success, it was sight. And in the gleaming towers of corporate America, that might have been the most revolutionary transformation of all. Dear friend, this story reminds us that brilliance exists in every corner of our society, in the hands that clean our offices, serve our food, and maintain our buildings. How many Dr. Washingtons are we walking past every day? How many hidden talents are we wasting because we can't see beyond job titles and uniforms? True leadership isn't about looking up to find excellence, it's about looking around and recognizing it wherever it exists. Every person has a story, skills, and potential that might surprise us if we just take the time to see them. If this story opened your eyes to the invisible heroes in your own life, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with others who need to hear this message. Together, we can create workplaces and communities where everyone is seen, valued, and given the opportunity to shine. Remember, the janitor you ignore today might be the genius who could save your tomorrow. Choose to see people, not positions. Choose to value potential, not just pedigree.